So the title of this talk is actually not this. It's something else. But the font of this slide only allows capital letters and headers. So this is it. So the other name for this talk is "Do This and Die," and another name for this is "Things That Piss Me Off." And it's just that I'm at a stage where I see a lot of code. And a lot of code by a lot of people, and I have this list of a growing list of grievances, this shit that really annoys me. So I decided to do a talk about this, and why not start with a death threat? So why not? And this talk I will partly do with an additional guest host, Spider-Man, which I really like. Okay, so let's start. You know what, let's not start. Before we start, a few words of caution, because a lot of people like to step up afterwards and go like, you know, I disagree on a few key points. So let's start. Tim Toti, there's more than one way to do it. Don't come afterwards and tell me you disagree. I don't care. Your mileage may vary, no batteries included, don't drink and drive, and lastly, of course, if you do really have a problem, I care this much. I really do. Alright, so if you have problems, unless. I have a problem with unless. The thing is this. As a programmer, I look for if. I don't look for unless. I don't actually use unless in verbal communication anyway. When I talk to someone, I don't say do this unless. It confuses me. It confuses them. Usually I'll say do this if, or if do this. And it's just, it really is, it's nice that we can do it, but we really shouldn't. It's just very not intuitive for any programmer. That includes postfix unless and postfix if. Yada 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 if. Really annoying. Because then I have to reverse it in my head and go like, well if then yada 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 yada, and then I can store it in my head properly. So if you do postfix if unless or postfix unless, stop it, alright, please. Some really stupid stuff.
Aren't you reading from right to left?
Sorry? That's a good point. I'm going to have to include it somehow in the next one. Alright, some really stupid stuff. People who name their variables, there it is. People who name their variables A, B, I, J, K, whatever, N, P, Q, R. This is what I think of this. Like, this is so fucking annoying. If it's a C-style for loop and you have two of them, fine, whatever, I, J, but that's it. No N. I don't want to see P. I don't want to see Q. Don't give me R. It's really annoying. And A and B are actually reserved and used by Perl, so stop it. Trailing spaces. Spaces at the end of lines. Stop it! Really stop it. It's really annoying. People who name their variables var. People who name their hashes hash. Unless it's a fucking hash. Okay? Unless it's a fucking SHA-1 or something. Don't call it hash. Tabs versus spaces, which is always a very, very difficult point to get across to people. I'm going to try and make my best effort on this. Do not mix tabs and spaces. Alright? Do not mix tabs and spaces. Do not mix tabs and spaces. Do not mix tabs and spaces.
You know the entire Perl core is mixed tabs and spaces.
Don't get me started. Oh God. So, the reason is that tabs are not the same for everyone. Tabs are editor-based. They're environment-based or editor-based. Sometimes it's a single character, and sometimes mean 8 spaces, sometimes 4 spaces, sometimes 2, and sometimes 16, because who knows. Just don't do this. Configure your fucking editor to replace tabs with actual space characters, please, and try to make it full. The best rule is actually not having tabs at all. Just replace that, and when you hit tab, it actually does spaces. You can do them with all possible editors and operating system, including Emacs.
It will compile slower.
Sorry, what?
It will compile slower. The PHP argument.
What?
All right, there's a few things that are basically, from what I can tell, they're just misunderstandings of how Perl works and how certain functions work. For example, map without checking values. Sometimes you get people who write loops using map without realizing the map actually returns a fucking value that you should take into account when you write with fucking map. This is one usage of map where you have an expression and we're using the plus sign there to indicate that it really is an expression. And it just takes the keys from a hash, it takes the name of the kid and then goes to the key of the kid and takes the age and returns a hash with like the kid name and his age. Very simple. There's the Schwarzian transform where I take the sizes, I take the actual size, a checksum on the size, and then sort it by this and then return the first item, which is the size, which is what we got at the beginning. Why? I don't know what these sizes are, I have no idea, it's just an example. C style for and for each. This is it's a pet peeve, more than most things here. You see, when you use C, you kind of have to use the C style for because it's C, but in Perl we have for each. Also for, they mean the same thing, but it's different. So this is an example of how you use the C style for. You have a bunch of kids, and you can see that they're all their names start with J, which is a very special group, which I will not go into further. So there's a loop here for, and you start at 0 and until the size, and you increment by 1, and then you go into it. That's fucking stupid. We don't need an index. We can just use this. Isn't this clear? We can use for here instead of for each. I just like to use for each here to smack people who studied C and don't really realize they're not in C anymore. So isn't this nicer? Just first kid and kids, just kid. That's it. It's an iterator. It's the value in the iterator. It's really nice. Or this, and don't do this. But that's another option. So you can see it's much clearer than this fucking thing. Switches. People who use a really long amount of ifs to create the effective switches. It's really fucking stupid. What you should use is a dispatch table. And then you have like a hash, and then it's a value and the key, and the value is actually a code reference that does whatever you want to do. It's actually this part here, and you just check if it exists, or you can actually go if this, because it will be a true value, and find the dispatch table and call it. Otherwise, you have the else, and that's it. That's easier than writing like if. It's really annoying. And then you can actually play with this. If this is an attribute, you can actually insert different code references there. It's really nice. There's the higher order Perl book from Mark Jason Donis. You can get it here, and here is the actual chapter for dispatch tables. So there you go. Empty if clause. What the fuck is this shit? Come on, people who do like an if, nothing in there, and then they put the rest in the else.
Unless it.
Who here has done this?
I've done
You, stop it. It's really stupid, alright? This is why we have the not, alright? If not. Or theoretically unless. No, we don't. I've seen people who have a default else, also stop it. I'm an adult. I know that I could have an else there. If you don't actually have the code there, don't put the fucking else, because this is the thing. When we read code, a lot of the times when we see something that is stupid, our first thought is, this is stupid. Our second thought is, maybe there's a purpose to this, and I'm stupid. Right? I saw you were raising your hand.
Well,
there you go.
the thing is, I think the case where I had that was it's if something and then a chain of else's following that each required, if the first check to be to do nothing, but then all sorts of special cases onwards.
So nested.
And the something could have a
How
side
does that
effect,
relate to-
actually.
What?
The something could have a side effect.
And that something could have side effect. Yeah, but it's just,
incremental something.
make it very clear, make it straightforward. There's an if, there's an if. There's if not, then if not, and don't put an else unless there's actual code there.
Lab?
What? If not, more code. Alright, return variables. People who come from Java do this often. They say, I'll have a variable and I'll put values in that variable, and at the end I will return it, and then we have a single exit point, a single return statement.
That's Pascal programmers.
I actually did Pascal and I did not do this. But Java programmers always come up to me after I give this talk in more generic forums and go like, well, that's kind of cool though. I like having a single point. No, learn the phrase exit early, okay? Do a check. If it's not good, exit. Because you need to realize, as a person who reads this, you're actually storing more and more in your buffer, in your memory, right? And you have to put more and more shit in there. The more you read, the more you have to remember at the exact same time all together. Now, if you exit early, you can actually let me remove parts of my memory buffer. You know, I don't have to remember all this fucking method that is like 300 fucking lines. I don't have to do that.
That's a small method.
You exit early and go, well, it's not this. We're good. I keep going. So just, so fucking ugly.
Would you use an else if or another if there? If you just return from the if.
I actually do this and return. I really like the and in or. And then if I want to return this, if this is true, I will do this and return this.
It's sort of postfix, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's postfix, but it's actually infix. It's infix. Nuts to that. Infix. All right, class methods, and this is really interesting because not always, but oftentimes when people write this, this actually means I do not know how to use the tools that I have. Kind of like this. Have a knife and a gun, you figure out, well, I can make a knife gun. Right? Because you don't really realize how those things interconnect. So sometimes using a class method, well, maybe, but usually you either want a function or you want a class. Either that or this. Very rarely, I cannot think of a single one. I'm betting there is at least one person here who can, but I cannot think of a single instance in which you go like, no, actually it needed to be a method without an instantiated object, but it shouldn't be a function. Like, sorry?
Yeah.
Sometimes new.
Well, if it's new, but this is not new, this is my method. And I actually see this often. I saw an entire interface to I don't remember the name of it, an interface to GUI programming, GUI testing, and the entire Ruby interface was written as method calls. The entire fucking thing. There was not one instantiated object. Workflow, try and catch. People who use try and catch in order to, just have a regular workflow. If you come from JavaScript, you probably do this. It is not for workflow, okay? This is what Santa has to say if you're using try and catch on workflow. People use goto. You should not use goto,
Sometimes you
okay?
have to.
This is not C. 1 second. I'm still talking. See, goto is not for workflow. Now if you're using C, in C you have to have it because very nested loops in C, you can't get out of them, you have to use a goto, but it's Perl, you don't have to fucking do this. There is one instance in which you could use it, and sometimes using this construction here, goto and the ampersand and my function, you can actually override the current stack in the frame, the current frame of the stack. If you know what this does, you can use this. If you don't, stop using goto.
Also don't use it for performance reasons because it's actually heavier than just calling it.
Thank you. So use next, use last, whatever. Just stop using labels and go-tos because you don't know how to use next, right? Related conditions. This is something that, this is really when I stop, but I added one extra because of an internal discussion we had at work. You see this thing?
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Right? Do you see this thing? The thing is actually not this. This is the response that you get if you read the thread that people commented after they were asked to stop doing this. This is what you actually think when you see what people write about this. And the reason is that this is much clearer because they're actually related. There is a relation between these two ifs. And if there was only some form of syntax to allow us to connect two conditions together, like an else or an else if, this would be it.
Or a ternary.
Hey, look at that.
What if it has side effects?
If you know that it's going to be either 0 or whatever it is, you can use that. But it's if, else if, else, whatever. Just, come on, people. This is actually code. Except it's not boo and bar and foo, and I think it's not whatever. But this is actual code, so stop it. And when I wrote these slides, it's kind of the ending. So when I wrote these slides originally, it was just a list of grievances, and I didn't really have any conclusion. I didn't really have an ending to this. It was just like, stop this, stop this, stop this, or I will kill you, and that's it. And I had to think of an ending for this. And eventually I came up with one. And the ending is actually why I'm complaining about all these things. And if you know me, I complain about these things often. If you've worked with me, I probably commented on code that I've seen and asked people to stop this. And it's really hard when there's a culture of people who are very insecure about changing the way they program because they feel like it changes the way they think, which it shouldn't. And the reason I'm complaining about this is because code is alive. It grows, okay? And sometimes it grows to a ridiculous age, sometimes to a ridiculous size. But it keeps growing, okay? And you will probably not be the last person to look at it or to work with it or to make it grow. The next person might know you. And this is a very important detail to remember. You want to make it easier for the next person, possibly even you, to work on this code. So here are your options if you have a problem with this. And that's about it. Because you don't live in a void. When you program by yourself, that's fine. You can make all the shitty fucking mistakes you want to make. But if you program with other people, you're going to have to take into account that they actually need to work on this with you and to read it and to understand it and to, you know, what's the word for it?
Cooperate.
Yes, I was going to go with continue adding to it, but sure. And that's the main point on this, that we have to be able to work with others, we have to be able to cooperate. So if you have a problem with this, fuck you on Spider-Man, I think is the official response.
So, have you ever taken an opinion poll on postfix if?
Well, I usually I usually have the opinion of I don't really care what people will say.
Maybe you're in the minority, then you have to change your style of coding.
That is possible, but I'm also very loud. I was going for another word, but this is probably better. I'm also very loud. I actually asked a lot of people about postfix if, not in a poll, but I actually asked people, and most people said, well, I tend to read if something. I don't tend to read something if.
Oh, but I also not tend to read this and this, right? You are not.
That is true, but once I actually got people to read this, it made much more sense to them to have exist something or return rather than if not exists return. And I actually had a lot of work with people. I got to work a lot with people. I did, and in really big code bases sometimes. And oftentimes, once they got accustomed to it, they actually used it much more. It's the same thing with using map correctly as an expression when you need to. So to a lot of people, using map with a code block just makes more sense unless they actually finally understand how it works in expression, then that makes more sense. So we shouldn't equate, and that's another, probably another good conclusion. We should not equate writing properly with writing stupid or writing smartly as writing complicated. These are four different expressions. So you can write very complicated code and very elaborate code, but it would still make more sense than your simple code. And sometimes your simple code is very, very convoluted. Like the example with the two ifs. The two ifs are very stupid in programming wise, but they're very not elaborate either and not easy to understand either.
I mean, I'm just, so I'm very new to Perl and I came from C, and where you can just write like if something do something, right? In Perl you can do the same, but you have to put like a bracket, right? So I mean, and I have only like two ways. So it's either use like a postfix notation or do like this and something, right? Which like in both ways like doesn't make sense for me because they are all in
well, then you need to learn Perl.
Well, yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, I'm serious. The point is that
I mean, well, like you was
it's
explaining
in the
that
construct of
that's
the
not the
language.
way you're thinking, right? You're thinking like if something, do something, right? And both ways kind of like breaks my logic because it's either something, if something, or it's something and something. So it's
Well, your problem though is the problem with the language and not
Yeah, I
with
know.
what construct you pick in the language. Now, if
Yeah.
you go past and you go into the language, now you're in the discussion.
Yeah.
Because looking from the outside and saying, well, the fact that I have to put curly brackets for like a code block for an if, that's fucking stupid. I can't make sense of that. Well, then you need to learn Perl. You need to get accustomed to the language. Once you're in that circle, now we can start complaining about like more important things. I think that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any additional questions? Or
What about that
that I can
pattern
correct?
or
If not, what?
pattern or anti-pattern like 10 less than scalar array?
What?
Like inverting, or for instance, code not equal ref and name of some stuff.
I can barely understand what you're saying.
Oh,
We're talking about like 3 equals count rather than count equals
yes,
3?
exactly.
Putting the counts in
yeah,
the back
definition.
equality.
Yes, your condition.
I understood that last
That's it,
time.
thank you.
I spoke to someone, asked him why he does 1 equals something. He said, well, I always fuck this up, and
because
he used like a single
the reason.
equal sign, and then he actually.
The reason why one reason because like in some languages if you do like a
Yeah.
variable equal 1, it will be actually assigned and if
Exactly.
will be
Exactly, yeah, he
yeah,
uses
and that's
that-
why they got you to actually 1 equal var because
Right.
like it will be a compilation error.
That's what I meant. Like, you use a single equal sign by mistake, then you input. Well, I think that's foolproof. Sometimes idiot-proof. I frankly don't care that much about this. Like, I don't find that much of an issue because I can read them pretty much the same. And I think most of us can. At first, when you're looking at it, you go like, what the fuck? You don't know the difference between these two, and then, well, it's okay.
There's no warning.
Most of these are not that much.
Is there no warning for this? There's no warning in C?
Well, in Perl you want it because it's an expression, and you're
Yeah.
free to use an assignment as an expression, and then use that in an if. It's totally valid. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is valid to use.
That's why it's a warning in C. It's not an error, it's a warning.
Well,
The
it's
warning's
not
in C,
necessarily
I
an
thought.
error.
The warning is C.
It's not necessarily an error. Today I wrote a code that actually takes a variable and throws it into a hash while it incremented. So it's like key equals the scalar plus equals something, plus equals step. And then every time it inserts it, it also increments it with a step. To me, that saved me some code and it makes a lot of sense. Just use that and increment for the next time. Actually, it increments and then stores it.
What's your take on auto-vivification?
Auto-vivification. Sometimes very important, sometimes very shitty, and then use no auto-vivification from Vincent P. I had one instance in which it was really, really crucial, and one instance in which it was really, really damaging. So you need to know when not to have it. Like if you use exists for something, you have to remember that it might be vivified by something else. And then you don't want it on def, and then you just want to make sure that you don't auto-vivify. Depends. I think that's about it. Done.